Today, we're focusing on something that is just fundamental for anyone in healthcare. We're talking about how to correctly interpret clinical data in pregnant patients.
Exactly, because what's considered normal completely changes during pregnancy. It's a profound systemic acceleration.
Right. If you're using standard non-pregnant reference ranges for labs or vitals, you're going to miss things. Let's start with the cardiovascular system, the engine of it all. What's the typical pattern for blood pressure?
Well, it's a bit counterintuitive. You'd expect it to go up with all that extra volume, but it typically decreases.
It goes down. Why?
Because of profound peripheral vasodilation. The vessels just open up. It hits its lowest point, the nadir, in the second trimester.
Okay, so between 12 and 20 weeks or so.
That's the window. Then it gradually increases by about 7 to 9 millimeters of mercury by the time the patient reaches term. It comes back toward that pre-pregnancy baseline.
So a key point here is that if you don't see that second trimester dip, that's a warning sign in itself.
A huge one. But when does a rise become truly pathologic? Like, when are we thinking about preeclampsia?
The marker we're looking for is a sustained rise. That's more than 30 millimeters of mercury systolic or 15 diastolic from their baseline.
And it has to be sustained.
Right, lasting more than 6 hours. That's when you have to act immediately.
Okay, and with that blood pressure change, heart rate has to adapt too. What's the expected increase there?
You'll see the resting heart rate climb by about 10 to 15 beats per minute.
So what are the actual numbers we'd see?
The median rate starts around 82 beats per minute at 12 weeks, and it can get up to 91 beats per minute by 34 weeks.
So if you see a heart rate in the 60s in the third trimester, that's actually bradycardia for that patient.
Exactly. That warrants a closer look.
All right, let's move to respiration. This is where things get chemically complex, not just physical.
They do. What's interesting is that the respiratory rate itself doesn't really change much.
But the tidal volume does.
Dramatically. The amount of air they move with each breath goes way up.
Which means they're blowing off more carbon dioxide, leading to a mild respiratory alkalosis, right?
Precisely. It's driven by progesterone, which stimulates the respiratory drive. The mother is essentially in a state of constant mild hyperventilation.
And the numbers back that up. The partial pressure of carbon dioxide drops to, 28 to 32 millimeters of mercury?
It does, and the kidneys have to compensate for that. So serum bicarbonate drops to between 18 and 21 milliequivalents per liter.
So somewhere in the 19 to 20 range is pretty typical.
Yes. And the clinical takeaway here is so important. Oxygen consumption is higher, so pregnant patients have very little reserve.
Meaning they desaturate much, much faster if they stop breathing or hypoventilate.
Much faster. It's a critical point to remember during any procedure.
Okay, let's shift to hematology. We just talked about massive volume expansion, so how does that affect the blood itself? What defines physiologic anemia?
Physiologic anemia is really a dilution effect. The plasma volume expands by a huge amount, about 50%.
50%.
But the red blood cell production doesn't quite keep up with that expansion.
So you have more fluid, but a relatively lower concentration of red cells. It's a protective mechanism, really, preparing for blood loss at delivery.
It is, but it means our definition of anemia has to change. We need to use trimester-specific cutoffs.
Okay, so what are they?
In the first and third trimesters, it's a hemoglobin below 11 grams per deciliter. But in the second trimester, at the peak of that dilution, the cutoff is even lower.
Down to 10.5.
10.5 grams per deciliter. If you use the standard 12, you're going to overdiagnose anemia all the time.
Right. Okay, what about white blood cells? This is another area where the normal range gets confusing.
It really is. Leukocytosis is common. The normal range for white blood cells goes way up, especially during labor and postpartum.
So seeing a count of 15,000 isn't necessarily alarming.
Not at all. It could be perfectly normal. But here's the paradox.
That even with all those white cells, the patient is still considered relatively immunosuppressed.
Exactly. Neutrophil function is a bit suppressed, likely to stop the immune system from reacting to the fetus.
So a high white count is less specific for an infection, but when an infection does happen, the body might be less effective at fighting it.
That's the tightrope we walk. Now, what about platelets? Do they follow suit?
You'd think so, but no. We actually see a mild decrease in the platelet count.
A decrease?
Yep. It's likely from hemodilution again. Normal values can dip below the usual 150,000 per microliter. We might see them down around 120,000, and that can still be normal.
Good to know. And finally, coagulation. This is a big one. What changes create that hypercoagulable state we always talk about?
Pregnancy is, by definition, a hypercoagulable state. is to prevent hemorrhage, but it increases the risk for venous thromboembolism by about 5 or 6 times.
What specific factors are changing?
We see big increases in procoagulant factors, things like fibrinogen, factor VIII, and von Willebrand factor.
And at the same time, the natural anticoagulants are suppressed.
That's right. Protein S, most notably, decreases. So the whole system is tipped toward clotting.
How does that show up on our basic labs?
Well, the prothrombin time and partial thromboplastin time both shorten a bit. And the erythrocyte sedimentation rate is often high, but that's just from the increase in plasma proteins like fibrinogen. It's usually not a sign of pathology.
Okay, so let's move to the kidneys, the filtration system that has to handle all this extra volume. What happens to the glomerular filtration rate?
The GFR and renal plasma flow just skyrocketed. They increase by 40 to 50%. The kidneys are in overdrive.
And that high-speed filtration has a direct effect on our most common renal labs, right?
Yeah.
Blood urea, nitrogen, and creatinine.
A huge effect. Because clearance is so much higher, the normal levels for both of them drop. They're physiologically lower.
This might be one of the most important takeaways for anyone listening. A creatinine of 1.0 in a pregnant patient is not normal.
The upper limit of normal for creatinine in pregnancy is around 0.8 milligrams per deciliter.
0.8.
Yes. Anything above that, a 0.9, a 1.0, you have to treat that as an acute renal injury until proven otherwise.
Understood. Now, what about what we see on a urinalysis? What's normal versus what's always a red flag?
Because of that super high GFR, sometimes the renal tubules can't reabsorb all the glucose. So a little bit of glycosuria glucose in the urine can be a normal finding.
But a lot of it should still make you think.
Oh, absolutely. Significant glycosuria could point to gestational diabetes, so you need to investigate that. But some findings are never normal.
Like proteinuria and hematuria.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Protein or blood in the urine must always be investigated no matter what.
Got it. Before we wrap up, are there any other sort of minor shifts in vitals or metabolism we should know about?
There are a few.
Yeah.
We sometimes see a slight drop in median body temperature late in pregnancy. Oxygen saturation might also dip just a little, from maybe 98% down to 97% at term.
Still normal, but less of a safety margin.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And metabolically, the body's preparing to feed the fetus, so you see increased insulin resistance.
Which can lead to some mild fasting hyperglycemia.
Yes, these are normal adaptations, but they're also what we monitor to make sure it doesn't cross over into true gestational diabetes.
Okay, so let's put a pin in this. What is the one central application everyone should remember?
It's that you must always interpret clinical data using pregnancy-specific reference ranges. Always. If you don't contextualize these values, you'll either miss true pathology or chase after normal changes.
So you now have this unique physiologic baseline, from the 91 beats per minute heart rate to that 0.8 creatinine cutoff. The challenge for you now is to apply this. Recognizing this new baseline is the absolute first step to spotting a deviation.